Hello and welcome to Take a Wander with Shebs. Now I'm looking back at my talk with my good friend Ernest White II from Flybrother.
Ernest and I spoke live on my Instagram on June the 8th, 2020. Our topic of discussion was on whether diversity within the travel industry exists. We also discussed racism in society following the Black Lives Matter movement. Plus we talked about his show, Flybrother with Ernest White II.
So sit back and enjoy.
Hi Ernest, how's it going?
Hey, Shebs, how are you, man?
Not too bad. Oh, it looks like a nice sunny day.
It is. It's very sunny. I don't know if I should sit here or go in the shade just because the California sun can burn. So actually, let me go walk under a tree or something.
How did you get into the world of travel? And was it from an early age?
Yes,
what was it?
Definitely. I've just always been a geography nerd, man. I was a geek. I memorized all the names of the countries in the world and the capitals, and I used to love maps and just flags and different national costumes. And I was always drawn to things that were just spoke to other cultures. I grew up in both of my parents were teachers, so there were books in the house and encyclopedias. I would take I don't know if you guys had the same brands, but Encyclopedia Britannica was for the upper class. We had World Book Encyclopedia, and M edition was the thickest. And I would take that with me to summer camp. You know, so everyone's out playing in the yard, and I'm like reading the largest volume of the encyclopedia because it was travel to me. You know, I grew up in Florida. Walt Disney World was the place we would go to as kids. It was much cheaper then. And they built Epcot Center, which had these different countries that you could visit. And again, there was always that sense of adventure that was in me and the desire to travel and get out into the world. And I tell this story a lot, but I grew up in church, as all good Southern boys do. And the wife of my preacher, Mrs. Estelle McKissick, she was also a teacher, and she gave me a book called Free Stuff for Kids for Christmas one time. I had to have been maybe 8 or 9 years old. And in that book, you could order by sending off a postcard to different tourism boards and convention and visitors bureaus. You could send off a postcard, and they'd send you information. They'd send you posters and travel books, and there's some kids coming out enjoying it. So sorry about that. But they would just send all this information in this was pre-internet, you know, so the 1980s. And you would open up these books, and they would just have photographs of the things you could do in Singapore and in Monaco, in LA. You know, I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, man. It's a southern city, kind of suburban, you know, so just to see what life was like in all these different places, to see movies like Women on the Verge of a Nervous Breakdown by Pedro Almodovar. I was like 9 years old watching this and being swept up in the drama of Spanish. And you know, I probably was too young to be watching that film. But my point is just having access to a different world. And I was always drawn out into it. And recently someone asked me if I was scared when I did my first trip. I did a study abroad, foreign exchange trip the summer of between my junior and senior years of high school to Sweden. Because I wanted to host a foreign exchange student, and my parents were like, no, but you can go. So I ended up going, and I wasn't afraid, not because I had done anything to not be afraid, you know, built up this, I just was curious. And on some level, I guess I kind of knew I would be all right, that everything would be all right. And it doesn't mean that I've not had experiences in the world that I've experienced racism, I've experienced homophobia, I've experienced I've experienced discrimination on the road. But more than that, I've experienced welcome. I've experienced love and peaceful embrace and just the experience of humanity. And so that's kind of what keeps me out in the world, you know, as a way of connecting with people and showing Black Americans, showing all Americans, and showing all humans that we belong out in the world. We belong connected to each other. You know, that connectivity is what makes life worth living to me.
For what happened a couple of weeks ago, it's obviously had a massive impact on a lot of people's lives. Will each government sort of look at it and go, right, things need to change, especially in the States?
Well, man, I think, you know, that is what's happening right now. So the fact that you have uh, handheld technology. You know, what we're seeing is the next iteration of what people were able to see with the advent of television in the 1960s, showing police dogs attacking protesters and water hoses turned on people wearing their Sunday best during the civil rights movement of the 1960s in the American South. And people were shocked to see that happening on television. And you had a large movement in that direction because the awareness was there in a way that hadn't existed before. And I think now the same thing is happening, that people are seeing things on social media, and also they're seeing things because we were on quarantine in many places in the world. So things that would have ordinarily kind of not been so noticed have come to the fore. And I think that's why you've got such a large global response to it. Racism is a global issue. It didn't start in the United States. You know, the original Native Americans were pushed off their lands by the British, by the Dutch, by the French, by the Spanish. You know, so I think it's important that ownership is taken and stock is taken globally, because this racism is only one of the many isms that serve to separate us as human beings. You know, we are a global community made up of smaller and diverse and amazing and wonderful communities. And I think this is an opportunity now that not only are people around the world seeing ways that they can connect better with each other, but societies and governments as well. And so, you know, you are seeing local governments changing ordinances, making allowing police officers to step in when they see one of their own kind of be out of line. There's ways that that local and state and national or local and state jurisdictions are kind of really acting to create just a more peaceful environment for us all.
One of the questions I've got for you is about the diversity within the travel industry. So I've looked at it in the past couple of weeks, and a lot of it is this sort of white, blonde. Is there any diversity, would you say?
This is not a topic that just racism is not a topic that can be discussed in one conversation.
No.
The travel industry is not a topic that can be discussed in one conversation. But just to touch on a few points, I will just focus, let's say, on the travel industry and diversity there.
Yeah.
You know, historically, at least in the United States, travel as an industry in its early days was prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. And while you always had people of all different backgrounds traveling, I mean, we just there's an article around that's circulating talking about the sole black passenger on the Titanic, who was a man of Haitian descent. You know, and that's not a story that's often told. He perished, unfortunately, but he was well-to-do and was married to a French woman, and his children were on the boat in first class with him. But so traveling has always happened for many different types of people. But the travel industry, in terms of the storytelling space, in terms of the publications that would write travel narrative, which started off in the old days as explorer tales, you know, and tales of adventure and that kind of thing. And then it turned into travel narrative moving forward, and then into the commercial travel writing that we've seen in the latter part of the 20th century into the 21st century. It's always been white dominated, you know, and part of that has to do with the fact that the upper classes were mostly white that were traveling in the West, and then having access to editors who could relate to the experiences, you know. You're looking at something that's been kind of skewed towards one particular group of people for much of its existence. And even now, yes, when you do look at travel influencers, it's more diverse than it's ever been. And at the same time, it still heavily skews towards kind of that. And I don't want to necessarily, the blonde, blue-eyed kind of paragon, if you will.
Yeah.
And I think this is a call for destinations, for publications to consider the work of people of color who are writers, You know, yes, obviously it's important to get Black voices. It's important to have Latino voices. I don't see a lot of Latino travel writers and content creators that are given pride of place. Very few people from South and West Asia or East Asia, for that matter. And so in general, there's a lack of diversity that I think is now being addressed in a large kind of vocal way. And I want to believe that people are doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. Yeah. And I'm looking forward to see if this is sustainable. Because, you know, Shebs, man, you have a story to tell. You know, let me ask you a question. Were you born in the UK?
Yes, I was born in London. In fact, where I grew up in London, the first part of my 10 years, it was quite a rough neighborhood. There was a bit of racial tensions. That was because I was from the east part of London, but now when you go to it, it's changed. My family originate from Bangladesh, so they migrated across to the UK in the early 80s, and you know, it was tough going. It wasn't easy. Sure, of course, especially for migrants. It was. My dad would tell me stories of when they first moved. You'd have to pay to get a shower. That's what it was. That's what it was like. You literally had to pay 20 cents or 30 cents or whatever to get a shower. That's how tough it was at the time. But I think it was the government at the time. It was difficult and stuff. But it's changed now. I mean, sure. I grew up. Again, you don't realize when you're a kid anyway. But I grew up in I don't know. I'm sure you call it bed and breakfasts as well, don't you? Is that right?
Yes, B&Bs. Yes.
Yes, so B&Bs. So the first part of my 5-6 years, it was uncles' houses, B&Bs. That's sure. You don't realize these things until you get older.
But man, that was travel. You know, that was and your folks coming over from Bangladesh were traveling, even if it wasn't a vacation or leisure travel. And I'm sorry for interrupting. But the reason I asked you that is because that's the kind of narrative. Those are the narratives that need to be told as well. Yes. You know, your experiences, let's say if you did, I don't know if you have been back to Bangladesh or not, or not back because you're not from Bangladesh, even though that's the origin of your cultural background. But you're British as well, you know, so kind of going there as a Londoner, you know, I would love to read about your experiences on the ground in a culture that you have familiarity with, but that you're still not a local because you're a London boy, you know, like those kinds of things those are stories that need to be told and need to be out there. So that's on one side, the travel narrative aspect, but even on the commercial side, you know, you've got a voice that would be different than someone who is looking at that experience from a place of, let's say, without the filter of your own personal experience as a man of color, you know, and so, or as the son of immigrants. And those are the types of, that's why it's important to have diverse stories. And so up to now, I do feel like the travel industry and the travel writing industry, travel journalism has not lived up to its grandest kind of capabilities, because the whole point of travel is to get out into the world and to be part of the world. But the narrative has up to now been dominated by a small group of people who kind of, in a lot of ways, dominate much of the other industries that we kind of engage with as professionals of color in Europe and in the United States. And now that is something that needs to change.
I was talking to quite a big influencer a couple of weeks ago, and I don't want to mention their name, but they went to Chichen Itza in Mexico, and their version of Chichen Itza and their picture was completely different to mine. I mean, they were wearing, you know, night outs or evening gowns or even suits or whatever, and there was no one around. It looked like the picture had been photoshopped. When I asked, how did you go there? I went there well before anyone did, so I can get that picture and then get out there as soon as possible. Is that really what travel's about? Because for me, traveling is about the storytelling, as you were just saying. You know, for me, when I went there, I was sweating, shorts, t-shirts, jungle hat and stuff. I had so many people around me. When I first saw it, I thought, well, what is this? Do I really feel anything for it? But when I spoke to other people, they're like, oh, I can then see why it was so magical. But is it really that? Do we really want that sort of, narrative storytelling in the travel industry? I don't know.
So I'm coming from the perspective of traditional journalism. I have my master's degree is in creative writing. I worked as an editor for a while on magazines, and I'm still very much kind of a slave to the pen, if you will. And so I'm less of an expert on where we're headed in terms of like that visual storytelling or the narrative that goes along with influencers on Instagram and on these kind of little flash kinds of stories that people tell with just a photograph and a caption. And I think that's part of the problem is that, how deep can you go with a set of photographs and a paragraph? Not very. And so when you're playing for the game just for likes, as opposed to engaging with the place, as opposed to engaging with the people in a way that is sustained and in a way that really kind of shows that you are being present and you care about what you're experiencing. It's not something that I feel like is easily done on social media. So I think it's, as audience members, there's always going to be the kind of surface level pretty pictures that people are going to take, and try to one up each other on in outrageousness and uniqueness. But there's still room for those of us who do care about deeper stories, who care about a broader experience, to tell our stories too. And so you don't have to feel pressured. As long as you're speaking authentically, you don't need to feel pressured to have every hair in place when you scale I haven't been to Chichen Itza, but I've been to Teotihuacan, which is outside of Mexico City. And it's hot and you're sweaty and you're getting sunburned. And there probably are going to be a lot of other people around you. So tell that narrative. I think on one hand, there's this pretense of exclusivity that we all kind of like, I'm not immune to it. But I think you have to temper that with the reality of the world that we're not out here by ourselves. We're here with other people and we sweat.
Your television show is all about connection and friendship. So is that what the emphasis of is that where it came from your experiences and trying to tell that story through your show?
Yes, man. So, the show kind of came about from a blog that I kept for a long time. Just talking about my experiences as a Black American guy out in the world. Also, and you touched on this a little bit, colorism is a thing. My experiences as a person who's kind of caramel colored or whatever, brown, in the world, have been different than some of my darker brothers. And I say darker just in terms of skin tone, and in terms of features that are much more quote unquote traditionally African. They have had issues that I may not have had in a particular place. So that it's important to recognize that. And I was saying that I would write about my experiences, positive, negative, but also positive on my blog. And a friend of mine from college was involved in a small startup television network. And he was like, hey, man, we need a show, travel show. We want you to kind of to weigh in on it, man. You've got great stories. You've got a lot of experience. And so I ended up kind of developing a show. And I was thinking, like, what would be the differentiator? I'm not a foodie. I'm kind of a fatty, I'm kind of a fatty. Like, I love to eat, but I'm not really going to sit there and I can't go into, I don't have the patience, man. Like, I'm ready to eat, and the times that we do film food on the show, it's just like, oh my God, are you done filming now? Like, I'm hungry. So what my differentiator, the thing that I bring home most often is a connection, man, is a set of friends that I didn't have when I first got to a destination. It's people who I'm able now to stay in contact with because we've got the technology these days. Before you used to have to write, you could be pen pals and you'd send a letter or a postcard, or you would spend $6 a minute on a long distance phone call. But now we've got everything and everybody on our phones, Absolutely. And so I know the beauty of seeing myself in people who look nothing like from Senegal to Mongolia to Sweden to South Africa and every place in between. And I want everyone to know what that feeling is like. And that's kind of what the mission is behind the show.
And you called it Flybrother. Is it you? Is that what it is? Or
kind of. So Flybrother is a take on kind of Black American slang. So something that's fly is cool. It's interesting. It's, it's a term from the 60s and 70s, actually. So super fly and all of that. But also, of course, it speaks to the fact that to travel by air. And then, and I'm a big aviation geek. I used to collect timetables as a kid and flight posters and all that stuff. And then the brother part is, Black dude, brother. Yes. So yeah, that's all.
All right. Okay. And you've done a season of it. And were you were you ready to go out to film season 2 before?
Yes, we were all set to film an episode back in April. I'm not going to say the destination, but it got canceled, naturally and obviously just due to safety concerns. And
of course, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's, a lot of people, we've all experienced discomfort, if not absolute trauma, coming from the pandemic. And so, that was postponed, but we're kind of eager to get back out into the world as the world is awakening.
On to season 1. So how many destinations did you go to then? Because I don't know whether we can get it in the UK or anywhere in Europe or...
Not yet, but it's coming. So right now the show is on public television stations in the United States. We're rolling out into many different markets, and in the summer we will be we'll be airing nationally on Create TV, which is a cable network. And then later in the year, opportunities through streaming and other platforms to see the show internationally. But at the moment, we're strictly on public television stations. So check your local listings if you are in the United States, or you can visit our website, flybrother.net. I have to always say these things. But the series, we filmed in about 11 destinations total, though only 10 have found their way into an episode. Well, not 10, 11, but we've got 10 episodes. And season 1 is, go in order, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Tbilisi, Georgia, Toronto, Canada, Northern Namibia, Stockholm, Sweden, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, Mumbai, India, Tajikistan, Cape Town, South Africa, and the final episode is Casablanca, Morocco, and Bogota, Colombia together. Double feature. Wow.
How long did it take you to film all those episodes? Was it over a period of 6 months, a year?
Longer than that, man. We were bootstrapping this whole thing, and the journey's been kind of windy because that original startup network that commissioned the series went dark while we were still filming. So for a while, we had a cart but no horse. And so I would say from conception to screen, it's just under 3 years.
That is a long time. So
it is when but again, funding it ourselves. So
what people don't realize is the amount of effort that goes into it. Might be 10 episodes, 10 weeks of episodes, but actually you don't realize the amount of years it's gone into doing a show like that. And as I say, I'm waiting for it to see, because I love all types of travel shows. Where would you say made a massive impact on your life when you went?
Oh man, always Tajikistan. It's really just the Central Asia is it's a place that's so different in a lot of ways from what we experienced growing up in the US or even in the UK or like Latin America, where I lived for a while. People are people. So that's the beauty. You again recognize that humanity in others, but it's a combination of just these spectacular mountain landscapes that I had never seen anywhere, until I got to TJ. And then also just the warmth of the people. They're not really smiley in that part of the world because, and I get it, like that's not really a thing everywhere, like in the US with our skinning and grinning as we do. But the people are they care. They want you to feel welcome. They want, and what I learned when I was there, it's a matter of life and death when you're dealing with people passing through your part of the world there, because it could be, folks, it's arid in the summer and it's frozen in the winter. There's this harsh climate that they live in. And so they want to make sure that people are fed and have lodging, so there's that kind of culture of hospitality that's embedded. It's thousands of years old because Tajikistan's on the former Silk Road. And so that is very palpable. And one of the things that I learned when I was there, or that I experienced, was when people engage with you, they kind of put their hand on their heart and they bow a little bit. And it's just it's an amazing gesture, and that has always stayed with me. And it's in a place that people know nothing about really over here in the US. And so that's where part of my role is to kind of offer an opportunity for places to tell their own story. I may be the filter or the conduit or channel, but it's still an opportunity for people who heretofore have not had their voices heard on a global stage in the way that a Paris might have. And there's, obviously we'll be going to Paris too. We love Paris.
Yeah.
And there's stories there that haven't been told either, that are just kind of waiting and bursting at the seams. And that is what I love about what I do. It's not just that I get to travel, but that I get to really engage with people who are excited to be engaged with. They're excited to talk to somebody who wants to know what's going on, in their lives.
Absolutely. Having so much time now back at home. Obviously, you said you were away on the road for 3 years.
Well, not like 3 solid years, but back and forth.
Back and forth, yeah. Has it sort of made you appreciate your home life? Because has it had an impact on your home life? I would say with all the traveling.
Well, I'll say this: traveling for work is not the same thing as traveling the way you might do even as a travel writer. There's kind of, on one hand, there is the aspect of vacation or leisure time. And when I fly into a destination like Tajikistan to film an episode, I don't get a chance. It's not about like so much downtime. You've got to optimize your time on the road. And because of that, because you're working and you're on the entire time, when you're home, you just really appreciate it more as a place to just relax. I would say that I do appreciate my home life much more now after having done a season of a show. Doesn't mean I'm not ready to get back out into the world, but it does mean that I feel a bit more anchored than I did before. And it's because I desired that anchor by being on the road for work.
Yeah. Has travel changed any preconceived notions you may have had prior to visiting a place?
I would say going to Egypt for the first time really changed and this was back in 2009. So before Arab Spring, and the revolutions that were taking place there. But as much as I'd like to consider myself to be progressive and all of that, I still, as an American in that part of the world, had some preconceived notions about, they probably don't like Americans. And I put on an accent and pretended to not be from the United States for a little while until I realized, this is dumb. They are totally chill with me being from the U.S. No one, not that no one cares, but it wasn't anything that would have had a major impact on my experience, at least on the ground level. People were like, "Oh, great, you're from the U.S.," and that was the end of it. There might have been some questions about, New York or whatever, but it just really made me recognize my own kind of embedded prejudice, and that comes from the fact that we're living in societies where we get media hammered into our heads, which is why it's important for us to tell different stories. We have to, because we do need to know what it's like on the ground. And my experience in Egypt is not the same as a woman's experience in Egypt or a Black woman's experience in Egypt even, so I positively or negatively. And so that's why, again, we have to own our voices and be out there and kind of, just tell the tale. As
you were saying there, each person's experiences, whether you're a woman or whether you're, whatever, is going to be different. I think that's the beauty. That's why I love talking to people about their experiences. So no one's going to have the same experience in terms of of their travels. So I mean, it's fascinating to hear, and I think one of the best parts of traveling is, for me, meeting the locals and trying to understand what their lives are really like. They live a simple life, and there's no stress sometimes. And you think to yourself, sometimes too much in your life can be a bit of a problem, you know?
No, indeed, man. And I wouldn't ever say that I feel necessarily that they may have no worries. I'm sure they've got worries that are, you know, but compared to some of the BS that we worry about, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. Like, we get so caught up in, and I mean, again, like, we also have to not flog ourselves over it. You know what I mean? Like, we can't beat ourselves up over the fact that we grew up in societies that we grew up in, that kind of, they're focused, or heretofore had been focused on acquisition, right? And so we are made to feel inadequate because we don't have a certain amount of things, or that right thing, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think in that regard, you know, a lot of other cultures seem to have retained their understanding that it's human connection that does matter the most. And I think around the world, you've got more and more people in all countries that are awakening to that understanding. And that's the beauty of what we do as well, because we can start finding those folks in our home environments too.
What is the most startling experience you've had while traveling?
Most startling experience, I would say, in addition to this, again, I'll give a few. Like in Tajikistan, just the mountains, and turning a corner and saying, boom, like this entirely different vista of mountains that I mean, just ever more beautiful with every turn of a road. In South Africa, it was just culture and the people and being brought in and feeling just an experience of home. In India, it was the Agra Fort in Agra, which has a view of the Taj Mahal, but in itself is so intricate and beautifully hewn. And we don't know much about it because we know about the Taj Mahal, which is, again, breathtaking. But Agra Fort, it just, in this red stone, that was, you know, startling to me. And then so many other places, just the serendipitous moments of connection, of intimacy and love with people. And I don't mean just in a romantic sense. I mean just in terms of that human connection where you can just be close to somebody and really feel like this is what it's all about. You know, those experiences that I have in so many different places. So yeah.
I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for coming on. It's fascinating insight into the diversity of travel, of how you started your show and everything. And it's been, hopefully people have been captivated, inspired by what you said. So I appreciate you coming on. And hopefully I always say our lives might, you know, cross paths, you know, when we're traveling. So
100%, man. I know it will. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and the audience. Thank you, Shebs, brother. And I'm looking forward to keeping the conversations going.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
All right, man. Take care.
I hope everyone enjoyed our discussion. If you would like to connect with Ernest and continue the conversation I had with him, you can do so by following him on all of his social media platforms. The details are on your screen now.
That's it for Take a Wander with Shebs. Hope to see you very soon. Until next time, bye for now.